Good evening and welcome to QTV. We've got another great episode for you this evening with lots of stories from around the globe.
We'll be chatting with Sydney performer Stephen Carrington about his most prized possession, a pair of Kylie Minogue shoes.
We continue our glimpses into Asia series with a spectacular floor show from a Q+ bar in Chiang in Thailand.
Activist Hoise talks about state government moves to allow gender changes to birth certificates.
We delve into the past to take a look back at Hillier, one of Melbourne's most pioneering Q+ bar owners.
Stephen, thank you for talking to me. You are a star of the stage on Sydney's Oxford Street and Newtown, Enmore, Erskineville, all over. Can you tell us a bit about you?
Hi William, yes, it's a pleasure. I am a singer and a dancer and a lip sync artist. So essentially what I do is I sing Doris Day numbers, Bing Crosby numbers, lots and lots of old songs. And then I dance and lip sync to 80s and 90s numbers, very similar in vein or to a drag performance, except we sort of call our sort of work boy drag because you're wearing pretty well everything apart from the dress and you're dancing and miming to male numbers. So
because of course you're not a female impersonator, are you?
No.
You dress as a guy, a slightly flamboyant guy,
yes.
But you are dressed as a man.
Yes.
On your left, you have a pair of shoes. Can you tell us a bit of the story behind them?
Well, that's a beauty. Back in 1988, I received a phone call from a girlfriend of mine who said, I've got something that you might be interested in. Get over here now. So I did, and she proceeded to pull out a shopping bag with 6 pairs of shoes in, and she said, my friend, whose name escapes me, has just been the director of The Delinquents, which was Kylie Minogue's first movie back in 1988, and he said to my friend that he had 6 pairs of her shoes that were left on the set, and did she know anybody who would like them? Well, after I think by then we'd had The Locomotion, I Should Be So Lucky, and perhaps a couple of other songs. She was well and truly established in Australia as a diva. So my friend promptly replied, do I what? I certainly do know plenty of people who'd like to have a look at this. So I had a look at the shoes, discarded 5 of the pairs and settled on this red pair, which are the shoes that Miss Minogue wore during the telephone box scene in the movie. I haven't actually seen it myself, but I believe that there is a scene in the movie where she has an argument with the boyfriend. She's on the telephone in the public telephone box and smashes the receiver against the glass, the glass box, which shatters. And she's wearing these shoes while she's in it. So they're very, very petite. They are size 5, very tiny, and one still has the paper that stuffs down to keep the point of the shoe intact. So these little babies just sort of have lived here for all of that time, and despite many people saying to me, well, Stephen, you could sell them on YouTube, not YouTube, eBay, that's the one. And make some dollars for it, why don't you? I sort of promptly say, well, a collector's item is that for a purpose. I'll just keep it because I admire the lady, and it's lovely having a piece of memorabilia like this.
Stephen, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Coming up now, all the colour and excitement of the Ram Bar from Chiang in Thailand.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ram Bar Show.
Oh yeah!
ตอนเรียนนี่คือชอบเป็นคนรักกิจกรรมครับงานโรงเรียนก็จะเป็นในกิจกรรมเป็นคนรักการเต้นนักแสดงออกครับแล้วพอมีโอกาสได้มาทำงานที่ลำปางครับ
A whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. No one to tell us no or where to go or say we're only dreaming. A whole new world, a dazzling place I never knew. But when
ตอนชีวิตวัยเด็กนะคะคือเรารู้เลยว่าเกิดมาเราต้องเป็นผู้หญิงค่ะเราคือผู้หญิงจนตอนเด็กๆเนี่ยได้มีกิจกรรมเต้นโชว์หน้าอำเภออะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะก็คุณแม่ก็ส่งเสริมมาตั้งแต่เด็กๆค่ะว่าเราชอบอะไรคุณแม่ก็สนับสนุนมาตลอดจนกระทั่งโตมาก็ยังเป็นกิจกรรมอยู่เรื่อยๆค่ะจนวันหนึ่งเนี่ยมีเพื่อนคนหนึ่งค่ะแนะนำให้มาทำจนวันนั้นมีโอกาสค่ะที่มีคนขาดเราก็เลยมีศักยภาพที่มีในตอนเด็กๆนะคะ
go back to where I used to Finally I can say yes I'm different and it's okay. Here I am, here I am.
Next on QTV, we're going to take a look at an interview with Adam Hoise from Equality Australia, who was interviewed on Joy 94.9 Saturday Magazine. And then after that, another delve back into the history of Melbourne's LGBTI plus community with historic bar owner Jan Hillier.
The Victorian government announced that it is going to make changes to birth certificates.
It's reintroducing.
It's reintroducing an old bill.
The 2016 bill
Yes.
that was lost by one vote.
Correct.
In its entirety.
Correct. That's exactly right. So they're giving it another go.
And it was
New term of Parliament.
It was an election commitment.
A new term of Parliament, they can give it another go. To talk to us about what this means, we have Equality Australia's Adam Hoise, no stranger to our studio, of course, and hopefully an ongoing guest as well. Good morning to you, Aram.
Good morning.
So we wanted to ask you a personal question up front, if that is okay with you. Can you tell us what's on your birth certificate?
Well, I went the very complicated way to get my birth certificate sorted out because I was born in Western Australia, so my change is under West Australian law. When I applied, I was declined, so I appealed it with another trans man, and that kicked off about a 2.5-year legal process that went all the way to the High Court. So we won our appeal, then the state appeal, we lost that at the Supreme Court, then we went to the High Court, we won it in the High Court. So I managed to get my documentation changed, but only after going all the way to the High Court, which is not really what I recommend as a simple process.
An expensive way to get a birth certificate.
Certainly is.
Very, yeah. Fun fact, the WA Attorney General at the time that I was in conflict with was Christian Porter, who is, of course, now our Federal Attorney General.
Attorney General, of course. So, but if you won that case, doesn't that then set a precedence and allow other trans men to automatically be able to transfer their birth certificates?
In WA, I would have thought.
Only in WA.
Only in WA.
Yeah. So this is the thing. So birth certificate legislation is state and territory legislation.
Right.
So there's this patchwork of laws around the country. So the ACT, South Australia, Northern Territory and Tasmania have reformed their laws, and their laws are quite good. Tasmania's are definitely the best.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Tasmania's laws would be the gold standard, I think we could call them.
That was a recent change, wasn't it?
That was very recent, yeah.
Last year?
Very beginning of this year.
Yes.
Yeah. But New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria and WA still need to sort their laws out.
Not for not wanting to try, of course.
Well, that's right. So Victoria attempted this in 2016, and as was mentioned, the legislation was defeated by a single vote, which hurt. I think I'd rather lose by a larger margin in some ways than a single vote. The other states are looking at legislation as well. So New South Wales is looking at their birth certificate legislation. Queensland is. WA has a commitment to it. But Victoria will definitely be the next cab off the rank.
So just very briefly, what's the change about?
So under current legislation, in order to change your birth certificate, you have to have had a surgical procedure on your reproductive or sexual organs, which is very prohibitive for lots of folks, and not everybody wants that either.
Yeah.
So it's kind of...
And it's invasive.
Very,
it's costly.
Very invasive. It can be. I mean, certainly for trans men, accessing that surgery in Australia is almost impossible, and not everyone wants it. The complications can be significant. So you need that. You also need 2 medical professionals to sign bits of paper that say you are who you say you are, so you don't even get to be in charge of your own identity. You've got to find someone else who can say that. And what that means in practice really is that people under the age of 18 basically can't change their birth certificates because surgery isn't conducted on people under the age of 18. And even if you jump through all of those hoops, in the event that male or female doesn't fit for you and something else would be a better fit, there's no options for that. So you've got 2 options: have to have surgery and have to have all of this kind of medical sign-off before you can change your birth certificate.
Wow, that's extraordinary. And of course, I'm not going to go into the whole health debate because that's a whole, and we've done that. We've talked about that on numerous occasions. I'm interested in the politics of this. So
do we know because look, I remember the discussions I had with the previous state opposition leader, Matthew Guy, about this, and getting the opposition to the point of supporting it. The challenge here is the politics of it are quite tortured, aren't they?
Unnecessarily so, but yes.
So the lower house, we know, yes. Yep. Okay, it'll go through the lower house. It's a government bill. The upper house is the challenge. Now we can count on, people like Fiona Patten and the Labor Party, but there's still about another 5 or 6 or 7 thereabouts that are needed to pass this, assuming that the Liberals and the National Party don't support it. So what are the politics about, Aram? How does it work out there?
We're feeling much more confident that this time it will pass, but it's not a done deal by any means. So I think the numbers in the upper house now look much more positive than they did in 2016, but it will still require some conversation and some effort with those crossbenchers. Generally, concerns,
and you'll still have to listen to all the tawdry debate.
We likely will, yes, which we know is immensely damaging for people. We saw that during the postal survey, that public debate had a really negative impact on people's mental health. There's research from the University of Sydney about that, and the debate in Victoria in 2016 was pretty atrocious in places, and it does really hurt people needing to sit through that. So that will probably happen. Unfortunately, that's the nature.
Aram, I heard on during the week an interview on the ABC actually with a Catholic leader. Mm-hmm. Who said that their approach to this was very simple and very straightforward. And I'm quoting now, he said, we follow the science, we count chromosomes.
Oh, for God's sake. They follow the science. When did they discover science?
Well, and chromosomes are not a straightforward exercise either. I mean, it's very important not to conflate the issues faced by intersex folks with trans folks because they're very different. Yeah. But the existence of the variation in human bodies and chromosomes says that that's not as simple as that.
It's also a bit of an offensive statement because it is not just about biology. No. It's about identity. It's about a sense of self. It's a whole social construct as well.
One thing that I would say to these religious leaders of all religions, of all franchises, and all believers is actually just think about it for a second. Aram is God's work.
We're all God's work.
Yeah, right. And this is about an issue that actually affects a small number of people. It's important to their self-esteem. It's important to their dignity. It's important to their legal status. It doesn't impinge on anyone else.
Jan Hillier was one of those pioneers who helped make gay Melbourne what it was long before anyone else was really prepared to try. She was originally an Adelaide girl, although girl wasn't the kind of word anyone would have used for her even back then. She was, in the language of the time, a butch. We have a photo of her on her motorbike. We have a photo of her suited up with her girlfriend at Luna Park. Jan had an entrepreneurial spirit, which she discovered in the mid-1960s when she decided to organise a birthday party for herself at a hall in Richmond. In those days, you couldn't serve alcohol without a licence, and you couldn't get a licence unless it was a special event. A birthday would count, and so she did. She got a licence, she booked the hall, she invited her friends. They invited their friends, they invited their friends, and so it went, until on the night of her birthday, something like 400 people turned up. It seemed like all of Camp Melbourne was there. This triggered a thought. Jan suddenly realised that in fact there was a market here, that camp people wanted to get out and celebrate and party and have a drink, and she was just the sort of person to make that happen. But because of the special licensing laws, she had to have a birthday every month in a different venue, and so she did. She had more birthdays in a year than most people have in a lifetime. Ultimately, this triggered her ambitions, and she became well known for her parties, for entrepreneurialism, and people started asking her to organise events at their pubs on quiet nights. And then she started to organise her own events, where she actually took the initiative, and places like Darling Street in South Yarra. She would organise events, sometimes lasting for years at a time, at venues in various parts of Melbourne, South Yarra, Richmond, Carrington, and so on. Her best known event was Pokies, which is at the Prince of Wales in St Kilda, which she and Doug Lucas organised, and which grew and became probably the most famous event in gay Melbourne in the 1970s and into the 80s. It was an extraordinary affair. Upstairs at the Prince of Wales on Sunday night, hundreds of people would gather. There were drag shows, but these were vast, elaborate, expensive, flamboyant events. Drag queens and trannies, assisted by young men with no shirts on, performed elaborate choreography in elaborate costumes, much rehearsed and expensive to produce, and yet Jan and Doug were really keen to make sure that this was a premier event in Camp Melbourne. It's probably the thing that most people remember most when they think about Melbourne in the 70s.
Didn't Jan put on amazing shows? I think it's great, and also to see that carried on in Chiang Mai, you know, like in the modern day. They're just beautiful, beautiful girls.
Fantastic costumes as well.
And really good dancers.
Yeah, stunning shows.
Great entertainment.
So that's it from Tess and myself here on QTV. There'll be more from us next week at the same time. See you then.
Bye for now.